This is OC AMAtv. He is the former CMO of Kodak turned global business consultant and best-selling author Jeffrey Hayzlett. His Adapt, Change, or Die motto is a challenge for organizations to embrace change as a means to thrive. His new book, Running the Gauntlet, spurs on marketers and business leaders to act as change agents. We caught up with Jeffrey for a candid interview on the SoCal coast at La Casa del Camino in Laguna Beach.
Well, the key thing is about adapt, change, or die is always to make sure that we're moving ahead and we're changing. A lot of folks like to think that once you get to a certain level in your profession or say in your business that you can just stop and right there it's over and you can coast, and that's not what it's about. When you go for a drive down the street, you don't lock in the steering wheel, and you certainly don't want to lock in terms of your business model. So it's really about adapt, change, or die. And look at all the businesses that we can see that are just littered along the way of death, of running the gauntlet and never making it through that gauntlet and died along the way because they've never adapted, they've never changed, and so therefore they die. So it's about a message to leaders that you've really got to be changing, you got to be innovative, and you got to be out there making it happen every single day. Years ago when I first went to Kodak to become the Chief Marketing Officer, I had meeting after meeting after meeting with all these different people, and one time I'm sitting in a meeting very early on when I was there, and on the wall was this big clock, and it was 15 minutes off. I don't know if it was ahead or behind. Probably at Kodak it was behind at the time. But needless to say, we were sitting there, and I had my staff and then their staff and then some of their staff, as would happen in some of corporate America, where everyone's got to be sitting at the table or think they've at least got to be in the room. And everyone started talking about the clock and it being off, and it was never right. And so then they started arguing about, well, we should call maintenance, we should call this person, we should call that person. Someone should do something about changing that clock. And by the way, this went on for months as we went through this. Every time we had a meeting, someone would talk about the clock. And finally, I just said to somebody, do something about it. Why don't you do something? And finally, this young woman got over, pulled her chair in front of the clock, stood up in her dress, in her skirt, reached up and changed the clock. That's a clock changer. Those are leaders. Those are the people that I want to look for in a business. Those are the people who span the silos, that are problem solvers, not problem seekers, that are cheerleaders and want to continuously improve the process of the business. We want clock changers in our business. In any business, you have people who work in silos. We all do, whether it's in marketing, HR, legal, whatever, or even in the various functions inside of marketing. We work in certain things. Maybe it's branding, maybe it's research, maybe it's, I don't know, something else, in operations or finance of your department. But what we have sometimes are these people who work in these silos and say, that's not my job. And that's not what you should be focused on. If you work for one company, you're one Kodak, you're one Apple, you're one Ford. It's all about spanning the silos and looking for people who want to change things across the entire business, not in just one particular silo. Well, there's a number of ways that you got to affect change, and there's 5 real reasons that people fail in order to drive change. And the first one, and one of the most important, is fear. Those first few seconds of fear, of willing to not be a beginner. They're so afraid to begin in the process that we get stymied. Think about if you've ever done bungee jumping or done something that you were afraid to do. It's that standing on the precipice and standing on the edge and being afraid to take that step off. But once you do it, the exhilaration, the fun, the excitement that comes from it is just tremendous. So for all of us, no matter whether we're new or we're old, and whether we're experienced or inexperienced, we all have these first seconds of fear, and it's about driving through that fear in order to get to that exhilarating portion of our jobs. In order to drive change, obviously you got to drive through the fear, but you also have to learn to do other things. One of those is to take risk, calculated risk. I mean, come on. We're in marketing for the most part. No one's going to die. I mean, the worst that could happen, we get a paper cut from a press release, or maybe, oh my gosh, we've spelled something wrong on an ad. But by and large, no one's going to die. So we have to learn to take risk. We have to be transparent. Talk about the elephants in the room. I mean, we all see them there. They're standing there. In fact, I like to eat elephants. They taste good. And then we want to make sure that we're focusing in on the mood of the company as well. Because if you can't change the mood, if you believe your best days are behind you and not in front of you, you'll be dead before you begin. I've described transparency in a number of ways. Let me give you an example in a small business, because a lot of marketers that are watching this are small businesses. And when we're doing well in our business, sometimes we are afraid to tell everything about what's going on. Yet you know, when we buy a new Mercedes, I think our employees know that things are going pretty well. When things start coming in COD, I think they know that things aren't working as well. So my belief is to be as transparent as possible in your business so that everyone knows everything about your business so that they can make better decisions and to be vocal about that. I remember one time years ago, I owned a printing business and I was really running short on cash. It was a very tight. We were growing very heavily, but growing really short on cash. And my manager went out and bought a truckload, a semi-truckload of paper because he got a great deal on it. Well, I didn't have the cash to be able to do it. And I had to go to him, why did you do that? And he goes, we had such a great deal. Had he known I was short on cash, even though it was a great deal, he wouldn't have made that decision. And so that was my lack of being transparent, of being afraid that he was going to know that we were having some tough times. He made a big mistake. And in essence, I made the bigger mistake because I didn't be transparent with him. In everything that we do, there's an action cycle of what I call mutual conditions of satisfaction. On one side, there's a performer. On the other side, there's a customer. In everything, whether it's in our personal relationships or our business relationships, and it's about driving those mutual conditions of satisfaction, or what I call promises. I mean, when you make a promise to your kid to take them to Disneyland or Disney World, it's a promise. It's not like a suggestion. And so we need to be able to do that in our business. Let me give you an example. If you go to McDonald's, you pull up to McDonald's, you pull up to the first speaker, you shout out your order. You pull up to the first window, you give them your money. You pull up to the second window expecting your food. But 9 times out of 10, this is what happens to you. Let's see if it happens to you the way it happens to me. The 14-year-old assistant manager comes over and knocks on the window, and I roll down my window and they says, I'm sorry, sir, your food's not quite ready. We'll bring it to you in a few moments. If you just pull right over here to this little parking spot, and they try to put you into what I call parking purgatory. And pretty soon I turned back to him and said, no, thank you, I'll wait. And I roll my window back up. And so pretty soon the 16-year-old manager comes over and knocks on my window, and we go through the same situation. He says, sir, if you don't mind pulling forward, you're going to hold the people up. I go, I don't mind. And so what I do is I tell them, I said, look, we made a promise, you and I. You were a performer, I'm the customer. I gave you my order, you took it. I gave you my money, you took it. I'm here to get my food. I'm not taking this kind of service. See, unless you're renegotiating the promises, you're offering me a Big Mac or maybe an apple pie or one of those McMinty shakes that I like so much, then maybe I'll pull over here. But if you're not, I don't mind waiting, and I roll my window back up. See, it's about keeping mutual conditions of satisfaction. It's about driving people to be better customers and better performers as you as a customer. And so it's really about keeping promises. In our business, I have promises to my employees, they have promises to me, and promises to my shareholders, and certainly promises to all my customers and my vendors. So it's that mutual condition of satisfaction, that action cycle that bonds us together. So driving change is owned by everybody in the company, certainly from the leadership in terms of giving it its vision. But really, it's got to happen down all the way throughout the company, whether you're the janitor, whether you're the guy making the product, whether you're the secretary, whether you're the person answering the phone. Everyone's got to be driving change. You got to know where we're going. It really sits around what I call the conditions of operations, or the way in which we operate as a company. In Kodak, when I was there, we tried to do a program called FAST, Focus, Accountability, Simplicity, and Trust, which stood for Focus, F for Focus. Really, what's my job? What's my role? What am I supposed to be doing? Whether I'm the janitor or whether I'm the person that's producing the product, or whether you're Jeff Hayzlett out speaking and talking. My accountability are my promises. What are my mutual conditions of satisfaction, my promises for the company, and being able to deliver that. And then S stood for simplicity for us, because we had so many regulations, so many rules, so much crap inside of a big corporation. And whether you're a big company or you're a small company, I guarantee you have a lot of those procedures. Well, we do things for that reason. So it's about being simple. And then T stood for trust, which really meant healthy debate, which means we're going to be able to argue about those things. We're going to be able to discuss them and not just take it for granted that this is the way we do things. Because at Kodak, we had a lot of things that weren't working, and when they weren't working, people would say, well, why do you do it that way? And they said, well, that's the way Kodak does it. Well, no one wakes up in the morning and can't wait to be stupid. So, it was a different way of operation for us. So fast became your mode of operation. So you need to ask yourself, I don't care whether you're a small business, a restaurant, or you're a marketing firm, or, a big Fortune 100 company. What are you doing to drive those promises? What's the way in which you're going to operate with each other, and what's the mood of the company, and how can you drive it better? So we talk about promises in big ways, and we certainly have big promises about delivering revenue or customer satisfaction or margins that we might drive in the company. But it really gets down to the little promises and how we're connected. You can take that one big promise and map it out through all the customers and performers and keep drawing those action cycles till you come up with a couple hundred of them. And it's that one little one that where someone missed a phone call, someone missed a response on an email that screws up all those promises, which leads to the failure of the big promise. So we're connected through these promises. It's really about how we drive those mutual conditions of satisfaction. One of the better books I've ever read in my life, in fact, in my first book, the best-selling book, The Mirror Test, I talk about books you should have in case your library burns down. And I talk about one particular book called The Goal that everybody should read. And it really talks about a story in there that's really pertinent to about keeping promises and driving change in the organization. And it's about a Cub Scout troop that goes on a hike and a gentleman who takes that Cub Scout troop out. And as he moves up the hill, up the mountain, the troop gets a little faster than some of the others. So some of the kids are really fast and some of the kids are really slow. And so he's perplexed by this because as the leader, he's trying to keep them together. He wants to keep them together because he thinks as a leader, he should keep them all moving at the same speed, all along the same way. And he's thinking, well, maybe I should put the fat kid back here and the skinny kid over here and the fast kid over here and this one. And it goes through his mind and he gets to the first rest area and the fast kids have already rested and they take off and he's with the slow kids. And again, he's perplexed until he finally realizes that he can only move as fast as his slowest common denominator. So that means we can only build as strong as our weakest link in our company. So I tell people in your operation, you've got weak links in your operation, so fire faster. You know, replace people faster, whether they're customers, they're vendors, or they're people, or processes. Find those weak links because you can only excel, you can only be as good as your weakest link or as your slowest team member. I think a thing for most agents of change is to really be good listeners. In fact, a number of years ago at Fortune 100 company, I termed the term Chief Listening Officer, someone to act like an air traffic controller in the operation. In a small business, by the way, you're the CEO and the chief bottle washer and the Chief Listening Officer. In larger companies, you might have the luxury of being able to have somebody who can listen to these conversations, but it's imperative for a leader to be a great listener. And by being a great listener, you can really act on what your customers are wanting, where you want to go, and make sure that you can change and help to impact the mood in your company and deliver on those promises. The other thing I think it's important for leaders to do is make it a lot nicer to where you're going to go than where you've been. And I give this example as I have a horse by the name of Jay. In fact, my horses are named A, B, C, D, and this one happens to be Jay, or I like to nickname this one Glue, because he's a real pain in the rear end. And when I want to get my horse to go on a trailer, because I'm going to go out in the ranch and I'm going to ride the fences or do something on the way off, and I need to get him there by trailer rather than ride 20 to 30 miles, then what I want to do is get them into a trailer. And a horse's natural inclination is to run, to flee. That's how they survive for many years. They think someone's going to eat them. So when you try to force them into a small, confined space, they don't want to go. And my horses are fairly wild because they don't get ridden very much, obviously because I named them A, B, C, D, and so forth. But this particular horse, when I take him to the trailer, he balks, doesn't want to go in. I have to talk to him very nicely. You know, Jay, let's go in the trailer. There's oats there. There's corn there. It's going to be nice. You're going for a ride. It's going to be pleasant. And then I back him away, and then I take a switch and I switch at him, and I start yelling like, yeah, 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 and I get crazy, and I make him run around, and I irritate him and bug him, and then I take him back to the trailer and talk nice and say, we're going to go for a ride. There's going to be corn. There's going to be oats. There's going to be a nice place, Jay. It's going to be beautiful. And then I back him up, and I do it again. I do it again, back and forth, irritating over here until nice over here. And by the time the last 3 or 4 times, I take him from the irritating place, I take him up to the trailer, he runs right in, because he knows that's a safer place to be. And that's what we need to do in our businesses. We need to make it more irritating, the places that we have been or where we don't want to be, to the places we want to be. And so we have to make it a lot nicer. And by the way, let me give you one more piece of advice. Act like a Viking and burn the boats. So burn the boats so that nobody can ever run back to the old place, and burn them as fast as you possibly can. Have a big bonfire.
This is AMAtv, a JSP Creative production, in association with the Orange County chapter of American Marketing Association.